This is Daniel Steinberg, and you're listening to a new podcast about drushes. Today we interview Rabbi comedian Mike Fine. Enjoy. All right, this is so good. I feel like this is going to be a podcast that's just for us.
Yeah,
but it's indulgent, but it's so enjoyable. So I want to let's take it back a step and talk about how you grew up.
Okay.
So I saw that I looked at your website a little bit last night, and it said that you grew up in an Orthodox household.
Yes.
And I saw a picture of you, a very funny picture of you at your, was it bar mitzvah, wearing a hat and a tux?
Why is that funny?
Well, I've never seen someone wearing a hat and a tuxedo.
Yeah.
That was just the...
well, it's, yeah.
A black hat and
I
a
was
tuxedo.
always very stylish. I love...
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, the truth is that everyone wears in the old days, like Fred Astaire would wear a top hat and a tuxedo, but like wearing it like a fedora and a tuxedo is...
But by the way, I could actually be the only, not just rabbi, but comedian that I have about 10, 11 different tuxedos.
Wow.
I have all for every different occasion. I have going from the 60s, 70s, wide collar, double-breasted, single-breasted. I have with tails. I have without tails.
Right,
I have
ruffles.
Yeah. No, my mother's side, my grandparents on my mother's side were Satmar, my grandfather, and then on my father's side they were America since the Great Depression, and so they were more into the tuxedos and stuff, and so but combining the two. And I went.
So where do you grow up? Was it in Queens?
Queens, yeah.
Okay.
Queens, New York, and
you grew up, and your family's religious.
Yeah, my mother is, and my father wasn't. My father grew up conservative, so there was that. In the house growing up, it was a mutual respect. And
is he religious now? Or
he became more observant as he's older. It's to teach their own, but it's I've seen both sides. I've lived both sides. So
how did they meet?
They met at both of their best friends' wedding. One was a bridesmaid, the other was a best man, and then that produced me and two older sisters. So.
Okay. You grew up in Queens, and then you went to what, like a day school or something like that?
I went to quite a few. I went to a bunch of different yeshivas, and I wound up at a place called Yeshiva Torah Chaim at South Shore, and under Rabbi Hertzberg, and he was phenomenal, and he was the only one that could put up with me, and he put me in the class with all the special kids, and Rabbi Stone, who was Hasidish, a short little guy, Hasidish guy, and it found out he was a Baal Tshuva. He was an All-American basketball player destined for that. He got invited to supposedly the Lakers draft camp.
Wow.
Got drafted by the Lakers, went to their summer programs, and right before he went to Or Sameach in Israel, and he hasn't looked back. So
the rest is history.
Yeah, so I was always around those types of colorful, interesting people.
People with eclectic personalities, and not just typical black and white. At what age did you? I mean, I guess comedy was always a love. Was that, or was it entertainment, or what was the?
So it's interesting that when I was 15, 16, a couple of years ago. And the Rabbi Hertzberg, his mother passed away, and me and another kid, we went to a shiva call, and what ended up happening was, I actually love shiva calls. No, seriously, because I know how to operate there. People get very awkward. If you ever been to a shiva call,
I know.
There's a whole tag team system. You're waiting for someone to come in the door so you could stand up, and it's like a tag team, and it's here, you can have my seat.
Right, or one person gets up to go, then everybody gets up. It's like
if someone comes in, I'll put my hand over the other chair. This is taken. Because it's. The person sitting, they're not supposed to, they're the one supposed to initiate the conversation.
Right.
So, it turns out a lot of times they're, I don't know, low energy, who knows. So it turns out when I was there, it was really the first time I remember going, and it was awkward at first, but then it's, comedians hate silence, so it was more awkward to be silent. So I started just like talking, and like, I'm like, oh, you have a nice spread, like, like, is this what Shiva's like? It's something to look forward to. Look at this, and it turns out that the rabbi started laughing, and the Rebbitzin came in, wanted to know what was going on. And, right around the same time, coincidentally, my great-grandmother passed away, and my grandfather told me to get up and talk. They needed someone to talk, and I got up and I winged it. And he said I was not only entertaining, funny, but he said it was heartfelt what I said. I combined the two.
Right, that's a beautiful balance.
So he said, it wasn't intentional, but it was instinctive. So he said, whatever you do in life, just make sure it involves, public speaking. And it turns out that, I was a horrible student, so I wasn't going to, going to higher education, working in a cubicle office, I'd blow my brains out. Mm-hmm. So it's,
Did you watch comedians as a kid, thinking like that would be fun to do, or like
both my parents have great senses of humor. My dad used to sit as a judge in small claims court, and I remember I would go there with him like a few nights a week when he'd be a judge, and this is before there was the show Night Court and all that.
Yeah.
And the bailiffs on their lunch break would come in and sit there because my dad was like cracking jokes. A lot of times, like, it was going over the heads of the people in front of him, but the bailiffs were like dying on the floor because...
So he's playing to them.
Yeah, and both my grandparents, everyone in the family was, very second nature. But when I, became friends with a lot of these older comedians, and like literally the greatest, some of them to ever perform on a stage, so you learn timing. It's when having conversations with them, you pick up.
Even in a regular conversation off stage, it's that rhythm, that timing.
Yeah, and it's like if you want to become a better ball player, you play with better people, and you're forced to elevate your game. Right. And so that was my thing. Well, the other comedians my age, they figure, I'm going to go hang out by the Comedy Cellar, or I'd see them wasting their time hanging around by, but then it turns out like, after hanging around with a lot of the older comedians and more seasoned veterans, and you hear the struggles and all this stuff. So one of the interesting things that I'm in the middle of writing a book about a lot of the tricks of the trade, if you will, going back to vaudeville, some of them, which, so they don't get lost. But it turns out that there's something I came up with, which I've seen, which there's a certain commonality. By being a better person, you become a better performer. And what I mean by that, there are certain tricks, and feel free to share if it works for you. So, like, for example, there are certain muscles that carry over from doing good deeds or mitzvahs that carry over into improve your speaking or performing ability. Like, for example, what is the scariest thing for a comedian, I think, and this is based upon my experience, is trying out new material. A lot of time comedians are very scared. It's like walking a plank. They'll go up on stage, they have the new material, and it's like, where do I squeeze it in? Do I do it in the beginning? No, you don't want to do it in the beginning because you want to get something rolling and then you sneak it in.
Right.
And
Sandwich
you don't. Yeah, and you don't want to close with it because
it might die.
Yeah, and you want to close it, so you have to like sneak it in somewhere. So it turns out, most of the time, like I've seen when I've gone with comedians and I'm trying to squeeze it in somewhere, like, A, they'll forget, B, they'll be too nervous, like they just can't commit. So it turns out one of the things I've noticed, which uses that same type of muscle where you're going to do and then retract, is like when asking mechila from someone, asking forgiveness. It's the same thing. It's, you wrong someone, what you're at fault, you want to ask them, you're embarrassed, you're ashamed, you're scared of rejection, you don't know how it's going to go over. Okay, they probably will forgive you, but you're too chicken, you procrastinate, it's the exact same type of feelings, emotions, worries, concern.
Yeah.
So if you start looking for people in your life that you may have wronged or did something, and start building muscle that you're confident or comfortable using those muscles, you're able to take those same types of risks. I've noticed it like that's worked for me. And there are other it's the same thing also. Like here's another trick that a lot of times people have trouble, getting over stage fright or getting comfortable on stage. What's just as equally as difficult for a person to do, asking someone out on a date, So even if there's no intention of really dating someone, but like if you're at a store and instead of just paying, for the person, to like sneak in like some sort of like a flirt, but like a playful banter with the person that you would never in a million years, because
beyond the business transaction.
So it's you're breaking like and it works. Like for example, I wouldn't say I was rusty, but like I didn't get the luxury of going on stage before coming here. Busy. So usually you want to at least just get your timing, in sync, even if not the material. So in the airport, like I was with the lady at the kiosk there. So I walked over to her, a Zoftic black lady, and you could tell, you don't know, it could go either way, and will she bite your head off or be pleasant? So I said, I just want to let you know that if you even think about upgrading me to first class, it's not going to happen, miss. I'm not going to go for it. I'm totally fine where I am. And then I go sit down by my seat, and like I look at her, and she just starts cracking up. And then she brings me over. She's like, "Let me see your ticket." I show her the ticket. She's like, "No, you have a good seat." And I'm like, "I told you I have a good seat, and I'm not going to take anything better." I sit down, and then she invites me back. And so like I had this whole banter. It sounds stupid, but like I'm getting my, I'm doing crowd work basically.
With a crowd of one.
Yeah, but you know what? You're using the same exact muscles, and people think that, I need to get up on stage before you. And so I made the person feel better. I hope. How many people?
Did you fly first class? Did she get you?
No. It was some regional, airline. I was like, So
that's awesome. Okay, I'm so excited to continue.
Yeah, we'll probably have to go soon. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about. Okay, so you went to yeshiva.
Yeah.
And then you graduated high school from where?
You're very presumptuous. I didn't graduate. I got a GED. I got kicked out of MTA high school. Senior year, and went to Israel after that.
What did you get kicked out for?
They claimed it was bad grades. Other people said I was chutzpahdik, but I wasn't drugs. I never did a drug in my life. I wasn't violent. I was wearing a black hat still at the time, but the rabbis were absolutely horrific people and shouldn't have been around children. Not all, but a lot of them were there for like 50, 60 years without exaggeration. And
it's an older generation.
And I have no problem. I actually get along well with it, but they just no patience, no whatever. It was like very.
Okay, so you GED'd it, and then what did you do after that?
I did. Went to Neve Zion in Israel for the year, which was phenomenal. But I didn't really appreciate it. I came back. I wasn't, really orthodox. I was getting into comedy, doing it more, part-time, but it turns out I went back to Israel a few years later. I was seeing a girl at the time. She went to Israel, so I figured, hey, what the heck, I went. And went to Neve the second time. We broke up in Israel, thank God. And turns out that I did much better there that year, appreciated it.
How old were you then?
23. And I really connected with the land, with the people. It's funny, the Mashgiach, Rabbi Blumenfeld from Neve, the greatest line, which I tell over to...
Is this the famous Mosh?
The Mosh, yeah. You know the Mosh?
I've heard of the Mosh, I don't know it.
So he said, never judge Judaism by the Jews. And
that's a great quote.
Yeah, and it turns out that, I'm not sure if it's his, but he told it to me, and it's so true when a lot of people that have had bad experiences growing up, it's, they conflate, the two, and you have to, so, and then after that I came back and, I was conflicted, because...
Right, now it becomes the great conflict, right? Now you found religion back, you you
want to become a performer, and then there's this... I wouldn't say it's a fallacy or a misconception. And back then it was definitely much harder, but you can't really be fully observant.
Right, Friday night's the big night of the week.
Yeah, but it, you know what? It's not even so much as that. I've lived on the road for years. You're in Lake Ontario in the middle of a snowstorm, 6 hours, drive there. You're performing Friday night, you're staying upstairs. So you're not driving, commuting, and so technically you're not, there are a lot of things there's not really Marasayim because odds are there's no Jews within but the problem is where you're going to find food.
Right, food, right.
So you bring food with you. Okay, they don't have a refrigerator. The place is a dump. There's like a million different things where, okay, well, like man plans, God laughs. You'll say, oh, I'll do this, and that. And it turns out, like, when I said I'm keeping Shabbos, when I commit to something, I commit, and if people have seen, like, some of my stuff online, they could see how, when I really commit. And I remember when I started committing to keeping Shabbos 100%, I was in... Oh, by the way, this is one of the biggest trick. If anyone who's not Orthodox wants to... make a lot of money, or even Orthodox. So say you're going to commit to Judaism because the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is going to start sending you tests right away where you can make tons of money. So I say I'm keeping everything, and it turns out, without exaggeration, I get a I get an offer, an email saying that, would you like to perform a holiday party for a law firm, a friend at the Friars Club, 15 minutes, like $3,000, and it's like, yes, of course. Yeah. When is it? Friday night.
Right.
Great. So I asked my rabbi in the morning in Shacharis, I just started keeping again, Rabbi Melman, I said, could I do it? He said, well, technically, you could walk there, and just don't use a microphone. Is that possible? I said, yeah, it's 15 20 people, a law firm, sure, why not? So he said, yeah, it's like, you're a chazan in a shul. You're getting paid for the preparation.
Yeah.
So it turns out I'm like, yeah, you know what? I committed. I'm not playing these games, whatever.
Wow.
So it turns out, I kid you not, I wish I took a screenshot on my phone. I'm walking out of Shacharis. Before I even hit the door of the shul, I get a text message from a guy, Chagi Barak, who I was friends with from Waterbury, who I haven't spoken to in years. I had rental property there. I had two properties left, and one of them was a nightmare I couldn't get rid of. The broker, the exclusive just expired, and he said that, your neighbor on the other side has a shtibel, but he wants to expand his thing. He wants to buy your house. Would you be interested in selling? He'll pay you whatever you want. And I'm like, what? So it turns out that I passed out on $3,000, and I wound up making like $30,000.
Wow!
Because within like a 5-minute thing. So like I always had like a strong sense of emunah, and you really need a emunah. It's interesting when I wasn't from, I also had a second job buying and selling combs, flipping combs in Waterbury. And when you have like a steady income, you don't really have that sense of emunah. You take things for granted. But when you have to really work for your sustenance and all that stuff, it's...
Self-employed, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really feel it. Tell me, how did you end up being not from high school and then becoming like what was it a decision? Was it just did things start falling away? Like what was how did you find yourself not from after having grown up from and gone to high schools and even Neve after high school?
How did I? It's a good question. They teach you religion or Torah in school, which is, and if you're lucky, like I went to Yeshiva Torah Chaim at South Shore, they taught you to be a mensch first. That was the most important thing. And, I remember the Mashgiach, the Mash told me, which probably actually saved me. He said, because I went to the Kulver Rebbe, who I'm still close with, right when I got back from Israel the first time, I was telling him I was going to be a performer, and he said they didn't know what it meant, and I explained the whole thing, and he said, I'm going to become very rich and famous, make a lot of money, but I'm going to lose it all to Nashim, which is another issue performing. You could be 100% observant, but you could be the most observant person in the world, but you have women,
right? The bachelor lifestyle, yeah.
Yeah, and even
on the road.
when you're not looking for it, not expecting it, and by the way, thank God, like he told me that, because I was always like very careful to stay away from that, knowing that even though it could be tempting, it's like that was. But the Mash said when I asked him what should I do, because my love is wanting to perform and it's a source of expression. So he said never. He said I'm not going to contradict the Kulver Rebbe, who's a very holy tzaddik, but he said never be never be Orthodox and resent it, because that's never going to work. That's in his experience, and he was 100% right. So what I was saying before in yeshiva, they'll teach you everything, Jewish education, but they don't teach you how to balance things in your life.
That's an adult. That's an adult discipline.
Yeah. It's an adult discipline, and I was very fortunate that my grandparents, and my parents also, they're all very big into chesed and very big into acts of kindness, charity, even if didn't have a lot of money, but very family oriented. And so things were always very priority focused around, and my parents wound up getting divorced. So, a mixture of what the Kulver Rebbe was saying about how you'll make all this stuff, which is one dream, but you're going to lose everything else, which I'd be losing at, so there's a sacrifice. And a lot of these older comedians who I've befriended over the years, unfortunately, a lot of them took that other fork in the road where they got all the success, more success and fame than you and I could comprehend, but it turns out that, they sacrifice family, friends, religion. I can't tell you how many times on deathbeds where people said they wish they would have got more of an education, more observant, more this, more that.
Right. Yeah, I want to get to that. That's really fascinating to me. So 1 second. So somehow you found yourself in this kind of conflict between observance and between being your love, which is being a comedian.
Yeah.
And then I guess somewhere along the line you found a working balance, and you're able to.
I'm still working on. You find it, but it constantly shifts because you're not staying. It's not, everything's not static. Things are constantly, and every day you're getting a new test.
Right. And so now you're Rabbi Mike Fine. And so how did that happen? Where did that come?
So when my friend Mickey Freeman passed away, Mickey was a huge star. He was on a show called the Phil Silver Show, Sergeant Bilko, in the 50s. Which is considered one of the top 5 comedies of all time. And him and his wife Annie, they never had kids. The sweetest couple. I can't tell you enough about how he just took me under his wing, the first person when I joined the Friars Club. And when he passed away, or I'd go visit him in the hospital, me and other comedians, we would take shifts. And I thought it was like the biggest I don't know, not sin, but like injustice, like who's going to say Kaddish for him, all these things. So it turns out, like, I went to visit him in the hospital, all these things. And then coincidentally, the way God works, I was invited to do a podcast at the time, and coincidentally, the person with the podcast ran Chaverim in Queens, and
Chaverim.
Yeah, and Hatzola, and he mentioned that there's a chaplaincy course that he just took. If I want to take it, they're starting. So I said, yeah, sure. I didn't know much about what chaplains do, but it turns out that I took that, and then after becoming a chaplain, it allowed me to get into hospitals, visit people, advocate for them. Another friend, Max Alexander, passed away, who I was very close with, and I wound up forming this organization called the Jewish Burial Fund, which provides burials for a lot of performers. And Max didn't have kids, but thank God his brother's a rabbi in Riverdale, and he took care of everything. But I wanted to keep these people's legacies alive other than just their comedy. And
that's amazing.
Yeah,
so amazing.
And then it turns out, like, people, a lot of these older comedians, they didn't have family, or if their family, they did have...
Alienated them.
Yeah, or some could be living in California, or some were very secular. And so, like, I became the point person because they knew the kids they did have, and let's say they were on good terms or not, I would be their point person to find out, like, how they're, like, I didn't assign myself. It's not like I'm in their will or getting paid or anything.
You were just there. You just happened to be there.
Yeah, so it turns out, like, and that led to, I became, when they started asking questions and of life issues, halachic decisions, all that stuff, I felt it was important to get that, to have the credentials, but also it's doing a service, because there's nothing worse. There's an old story told a million times about Georgie Jessel. He was the original Roastmaster General or Toastmaster General, and he would get up and speak at anyone's funeral, even if he didn't know them. And it's like the rabbis, you would see like these hired guns to show up to people's funerals and give a generic speech,
slap together a eulogy, and ask a couple questions.
Yeah, and so it turns out that, like, both my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and they lost people in the ovens, and so people getting cremated. I'm like, are you out of your mind? Nazis threw people in, and now you want to go voluntarily? You're sick. So it turns out that, when the families see that, even though they may not be observant, then, I show that I actually cared. I was with them. I had conversations, even though they weren't observant or fully observant.
Yeah.
They connected with their Judaism, and at the bare minimum, let's give them something, Jewish,
And you're somewhat of a peer because you're also a comedian. So
so that's the reason why comedians in general or performers in general, but comedians generally aren't trusting people, and because a lot of them have their own what's the word? They're not able to make themselves vulnerable, and you need a lot of times that I've seen, and that's one of the key components to, but it turns out that they can't relate to people that aren't. It's like I hang out with friends that are in the military. I actually, went to I was going to join the Navy Reserves as a chaplain. That's for another time, but it turns out that if you weren't in the military, like, you can't like, they are able to share their war stories. They could relate, to,
Right.
So same thing with the comedian.
Right. It's like a tour of duty. No one else knows what it feels like to, to live that life.
Yeah, and I'm not like some Chabad rabbi trying to slap tefillin on or push anybody to do anything. I'm just literally like a sounding board, and I have the same exact struggles and same exact temptations you do, but on a much smaller scale, because these people were, back in the day going on Sullivan's show, 80 million people see you overnight, you're a star.
Yeah.
Today it doesn't work like that. If people do recognize me, I've gone that before, but it turns out, they're able to, like, there's no motive for me. Like, I'm not trying to, they know I don't, so it turns out that, when you have that relationship with those people, they trust you. When I tell them about my experiences meeting the Culver Rebbe, they would ask me, could you tell me that? Like, they get fascinated by that stuff.
So how did you end up joining the Friars Club? How did that come about?
That was a whole, I always wanted to join. I loved the roasts, and I would see them on the Dean Martin show growing up, and then I became friends with some of the people who appeared on it, which was very surreal. But I remember I loved old show business, and the comedy clubs in the city to me were junk. The performers for the most part were junk. I wanted, and
you want to go back to the golden age.
Yeah, then it turns out that you have to get sworn in, and then a friend of mine was a member, and he invited me to join with another member who is turned out to be like a real shyster, and so I didn't join with him. It was like a whole long process, but I finally joined.
And you got in, and then you started to be friends with these old comedians that would go there, and then as they got older and towards the end of their life, they looked to you for their, I guess, spiritual support or whatever it is.
Well, there was that component, but to make things more simplistic, and we just someone there, like a friend, someone, because life could be very lonely, especially when you're the biggest stars of the getting invited to every night of the week, perform here or there. You can't walk into a restaurant without people asking to take pictures. And then it turns out that they, and then it just stops. It's a very, that's why it's like,
it's lonely.
You're not only lonely, but like depressing. People fall into alcohol, drug. They need some sort of high that they no longer. That. So it turns out that someone just I'm legitimately like I know all, like how many people my age. It's like reassuring seeing that, like someone 50, 60 years younger could reference all these things, do study, so they appreciate like what they were all about is not going to be forgotten.
They see their legacy alive in you.
Yeah, but I think the biggest thing also that when I was saying before about comedians aren't very trusting. I don't think people in general are trusting, but specifically comedians they're not trusting people. And when I'm there and that's why also a lot of people, performers tend to be single or don't have successful marriages. And when a lot of times I've experienced, the females that do want to go out, whatever, there's ulterior motives or they see dollar signs as an end game. But it turns out a lot of them, these performers, when they see a young person that just wants to talk to them about cooking or, recipe, just stupid stuff that has nothing to do with their craft, it's a great, I remember there was, my Rebbe, Rabbi Melman, is a Talmud, a student of Rabbi David Feinstein, who's the Gadol Ador, who passed away a few years ago. So my Rabbi Melman was getting honored. I show up to the MTJ dinner, which was Rabbi Feinstein's yeshiva, and on the Lower East Side. So I go, and this is the top rabbi in the world, the biggest, halakhic authority. So we show up to the dinner. There's a line out the door, everyone going to shake the hand, asking for a blessing. So it's my turn. I get up there to shake his hand. And I'm holding his hand, and I'm like, I said, I heard such wonderful things about you. I said, keep doing what you're doing, and God willing, this time next year, you'll become a huge Talmud Chacham, a big scholar. And he was smiling, whatever. Everyone sitting around was absolutely horrified. So it turns out that, there's a funny story about that afterwards, but it turns out that I spoke to my Rabbi Melman. I said, listen, at the end of the event, I see Reb David Feinstein and his brother Reb Reuven. They're there with their wives. They're trying to leave and close up, and you have these yentas there asking them questions about, cleaning their kitchens for Passover. I'm like, 6 months away. I'm like, really? This was the night you're going to bother the guy? Let the guy go home with his wife, seriously. So it turns out, I said, every single person that approaches him comes to him with a problem. They have a question. They want his advice. I said, let me ask you, when was the last time someone actually approached him and joked around with him or had fun with him or he got a good laugh? So he's like, you're absolutely right. Like, he didn't push me. He was like very pleasant. It was his nature. But so it's the same thing with these older comedians. A lot of times, like, everybody comes to them starstruck. They want to ask questions about this movie or that show, or So you treat them like people because they are people.
That's amazing. So let me try to figure this out for myself. So now you're a comedian and you're a chaplain, and you've kind of befriended a lot of the old great comics and learned from them. And now you're still on the road. You perform. So
I became more selective in the shows that take. I probably, after being in Columbus, I should be more selective. And I also run or help co-run one, the Jackie Mason Memorial Fund and the Jewish Burial Fund for the Performing Arts. So I have those two. I
tell me about Jackie Mason and the Memorial Fund.
So it's Jackie and I were like as close as any two people could be. He was my Rav and I was his Rav. And it turns out that...
Maza, right? Jackie?
Yeah, Yaakov Moshe Maza.
HaKohen.
And it turns out that when he passed, his nephew, like his sister, he has a sister and a brother still with us, and his sister Gail, who I'm still close with, one of her sons, Rabbi Avi Shulman, has a yeshiva in Kollel in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And Jackie, people don't know this, but he, over the years, fortune to support, yeshivas, Jewish causes. He paid for his nephew to sit in Israel to learn in Brisk for many years, and then in Lakewood for many years. And,
wow.
They would all get stipends. He paid for all their chasnas. And, so he was always very passionate about that. And after he passed away, his wife, Jill, who she's, their family.
She was his manager, right?
Manager, producer of all the shows,
yeah.
the most brilliant woman ever met, and a heart of gold. And it turns out that, she committed, to continuing helping his legacy with the nephew, with me, and, a small core group of his friends, and we continue to support the causes and charities he was passionate about, like the yeshiva, Hatzalah. Jackie was also the first and only performer I could think of that. I know this for a fact. He was the only performer that when he was on Broadway, every single room in the theater had a mezuzah they put on.
Wow. Which
is insane to think about. And then also he, mid-season, mid-run of a show, during, the peak height of his career, he stopped it to go to Israel to perform when I think it was the first Gulf War, the Gulf War.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it causes, in Israel. And so, we're doing fundraising and, the Jackie Mason Memorial Fund. And
Amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the, I see you're looking at your clock. The airport's 5 minutes from here.
Okay.
And it's a small airport, so your flight's at 12:45?
Yeah. So, it says boarding's 12:17. So
okay.
What time?
So
whatever time
if you're there by 11, you'll be 11:15. Okay. We'll go about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Okay. So tell me about the end of life of some of these comedians. You said you told me you said Vidoy with who was it? Was it with Gilbert Gottfried or?
I said it with all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's.
And what was for me? I grew up religious, went off because I had stars in my eyes. Was an intern on SNL, on Howard Stern, did stand-up comedy a lot. And the one thing I could never really reconcile was that it didn't seem to me that this was a reason for living, to tell jokes. It just didn't seem enough of a reason for me. And I was always struggling with that. Even though it was something I loved to do, it didn't seem to me that it was purposeful enough.
Well, by the way, not to cut you off, but it turns out that that's like a very blanket statement. It's a matter of, is it your purpose? It's not just, like I could say, someone's sitting at a cubicle doing data entry. Is that a purpose for
right? Right. Well, so I'll tell you like this. So this is my take. Data entry is kind of just a means to make a living. But I never approached comedy as just a means to make a living. For me, it was everything I stood for. The comic's mind. The comic soul. That's who you are, what you do. You're a comedian.
If an artist isn't able to express himself,
right,
it's a very sad existence.
For sure.
You need to express yourself somehow.
Right.
So it could be in the form of going on stage.
Yeah.
It could be from coaching, teaching other people, educating them.
Right. Right.
When I've performed with a lot of celebrities. I performed on television. I performed at any and every type of show you can imagine. And by the way, and not to toot my own horn, I know some of the biggest names out there working today. They couldn't do the show. I could be performing for Hell's Angel Biker Rally in South Dakota, Sturgis Bike Week. And I could also be performing for Hasidim the next day who barely speak English.
Yeah.
So no one, and it's too complete. I'm writing material that quickly no one's able to do that. So, and I know this as a writer because I know who my peers are. So it turns out that when I was writing for the roast, which Hashem works in very interesting ways, I like performing. But when I started writing and I'd be sitting in the audience, watching the jokes go over well, I really enjoyed that. I actually enjoyed it much better in some cases than when I was actually on stage, because in this case, when I'm writing, I get to share that experience and see someone else actually succeed.
Yeah.
And I don't have to physically be up there and worried. And I actually make more money by sitting by and I there's nothing more in the world I love than sitting at a desk, and I've had this working very meticulous. There's a whole science to it. Where joke construction, and I'd spend, no joke, 12 hours at a desk.
Sure.
One joke, playing around.
Right. It's like a math problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and it turns out I love that. So like you were saying before about living that comic life and all. It's sometimes God will throw you something that man plans, God laughs. But I get so much fulfillment out of like I was saying before, I used to, when I got kicked out of high school and I was depressed and I'm walking the streets and, felt like a fail, don't know where your life's going to go. I remember, the only thing, fulfillment, you sit and watch television, and I would see Gilbert and Rhonda Shear and USA up all night. Then 20 years later, you're sitting in the guy's kitchen teaching his kids, and it's like a Karasatov, because he brought me happiness when I was much younger.
Right.
Now I get a pay. I never took a single penny from them for teaching. And, I enjoy that. It was, and the most beautiful, sweet, like I learned from they think I taught them. They taught me, It's
amazing. Yeah. So I think maybe you're much more altruistic about your comedy as being a gift to people than I was. I mean, for me, it was creative self-expression, obviously, but it was something that was, comedians they're gluttons for attention. And that was, something that was like, really, really drove me. And I get the feeling that it probably was that way with a lot of, the old comedians too. It's like they're always on. They're always, they can't not do 5 minutes,
That is true. The thing is when I was, when you're friends, when you're with a group of people and you have to entertain them, odds are you're not really their friends. I'd get invited to a million Shabbos meals, and they would poke you and like get you to tell jokes.
Right.
And I would never go back again. It was
Right.
very lonely
Be our
for
clown
me. Yeah,
to
So when you're around,
amuse me.
the Gilbert, they're the nicest, sweetest, most down to earth, introverted, quiet, shy people that you have never even imagined.
Right. No one sees that side of them.
But I'm going to let you in on a secret that I'm not as altruistic or idealistic or. Really, what it comes down to is kavod, honor. That's really, at the end of the day, why you want to, or at least for me, being a performer.
That's the low lishma.
Yeah, because one thing that myself and a lot of these other performers, you grow up humble beginnings. You grow up, in school where. You're ridiculed, you're, not physically, but verbally abused, for being dumb, for this, for, and, you have siblings that are great students, and so you have all these things working against you, and you're basically written off and all these things. So it turns out, like, in order to have to exist, even if it's a fake sense of,
Right, even the score by being the funny guy.
Yeah, and then it turns out that, years later, like, people that, slighted you when you were younger, and now all of a sudden you see, oh, they're your friends, or you, and that's one of the things about me. I'm a horrible actor. I can't fake it. That's why. Like, there are certain synagogues where, like, when I was younger and, they would, like, there was one synagogue where I remember after my grandmother passed away, it was, let's say, the winter, so to get a minyan in the house, mincha was, like, very early, and it's very difficult because people are still at work, so to get people for a minyan at 4 o'clock. So there was one synagogue. I'm very tempted to say the name. I would say the name, but your people wouldn't know it. So it turns out that they refused to send out an email blast. My mother used to be a member of the shul and used to volunteer, but she stopped going. And the expensive membership couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
So it turns out they refused, and it's like my mother was davening there us for like many years, and we couldn't afford to pay, and like you can't even help us for a minyan for a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
Drop dead.
Yeah.
So it turns out that shuls like that come to me trying to get me to like perform, and you could pay me all the money in the world.
Yeah.
I can't fake being nice to your audience. I'd get up and tell the rabbi, I'd tell all of them to go F themselves, drop dead. You're the reasons why people intermarry and all. I like all that stuff.
Right.
So
right.
but you get that kavod in that sense.
Right. So what were these guys like at the end of their life when they, you were sitting with them and you said they had some regrets and they had some, they didn't spend more time developing themselves personally. Their family, things like that. What was it? Because that's what the shift for me was. I see where this is headed. I see where this. If I pursue my dream of being a star, I see where this is headed.
But it's not guaranteed. And by the way, I don't want it to seem like there wasn't closure with a lot. No, completely the opposite in the sense where. I'm there, and it's not like to toot my own horn. These people played a huge role in my life, and they continue to play a huge role in my life. And for all generations going forward, I'll be able to share everything of them. So there was, there wasn't unrest, but
at what expense? That's what they sacrificed their own lives.
Yeah, but. It's.
I hate to be morose.
No, but there. So if you look at the big picture, And I'm a big picture type of guy, and being a writer, you have to see the entire arc of everything. So there was a story, I heard many years ago, I forget from who. It was like maybe on a Yacha at Shabbaton. I used to volunteer for disabled children. And someone asked a question about, if Hashem is so merciful, why would he create someone who's disabled like that in a wheelchair? Yeah. So it turns out that someone said, well, maybe that person in the wheelchair is there and going through that pain or whatever for us, for other people, to be able to give, to learn from, to appreciate all these things. So if you look at the big picture, some of these people are saying where the sacrifice, like you said, or I don't look at it as necessarily when you see the big picture. I don't look at it as a sacrifice. It's a component. If they wouldn't have done that, then it wouldn't have left the imprint. There wouldn't have been that value. There wouldn't have, I would have, like, if they would have had not made those sacrifices, they would be in a completely different places. Then I would have never have met them.
Right.
And so everything has to, nothing's by accident.
It's a big ecosystem.
Yeah. And so before meeting them, and not to make it seem like, I'm this big component. I'm just a link in this chain. I'm part of the process. So it turns out that I feel that, being there and being involved with them and just, learning from them, and, if some of them didn't have children, to pass on their teaching, to continue saying Kaddish, lighting yurtzeit candles, their memories, it is not for naught,
Right. And I guess we can't judge. We don't know what their, what choices they made, what level of choice they had, or what.
Yeah,
but
it's like a very funny expression. I always loved and hate, when they say, oh, you can't judge them. They went through the Holocaust. How could you judge? Oh, yeah, he just murdered 62 people and, killed a baby, bare hands choked the life out of it. But, his parents, he went through a messy divorce. It's like people will explain, but there is a certain component to it, is that, even if they didn't go through the Holocaust, some of these performers, whatever, to live through the Great Depression was no walk in the park. A lot of these people were literally jumping off tops of buildings, committing suicide. That's how bad things were. Yeah. And the impact and the frugalness of people that went through that, it was like a real disease. So being children of that, being so destitute and so poor,
and wanting to protect yourself and
sleeping on the floor, so you it's like someone that was in an abusive relationship. I'll never get another. So if you come from such humble beginnings, such poverty, such, we don't even know about. So it turns out that, okay, the guy doesn't keep Shabbos or kosher. We're gonna why won't you afford him the same luxury of saying, like with why do the Holocaust survivors and my grandparents and most of my mother's family, if not all, were in the Holocaust? Well, how come they don't get that same? And you could say the
dispensation.
same. Yeah, you could say that about anybody who had, and who are we to judge? I know, unfortunately, several kids that, got molested, one at camp, when, and some are doing better than others in life now. But how do you, the mere fact that person could get out of bed in the morning, the guy deserves a medal. Right. So, I wouldn't blame him if he married and not. But then again, I also don't subscribe to saying just because you've had adversity, you have a free pass for, there has to be some sort of accountability,
Right. Okay, so I want to cut this off at part one, and then maybe on the way to the airport, I have a couple questions
Sure.
I want to shoot you. So let's get you to the airport, and then we'll pick up.
You could keep one of these for fun. It's a nice picture.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm Daniel Steinberg, and you've been listening to The Maggid Method. For more information, visit maggidmethod.com,
mathod.com. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.